episode of Beyond Sport, the podcast that looks at career aspirations, mental health, and different routes into different academic and indeed vocational courses that many of our guests have got involved with. I'm Mark Ellams. I'm delighted once again to be joined by Craig Collins and Nath Foley from the Sports College. And today's guest is Abigail Davies. Abigail has worked her way up from being a part of Sky Sports all the way to now being a prominent member of Gillette Soccer Saturday and indeed during the week. A vast experience within journalism, covering things like the Euros, the Olympics, lots of different sporting events, but also she'll give a good insight into mental health. Abigail, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. We're delighted you can join us. And we can't have any sort of podcast with yourself without talking about Swansea City. You're a huge fan of the Swans. Talk us through what are some of your earliest memories of probably the Vetchfield first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think growing up watching football at the Vetchfield, it was certainly character building, I think is one way to describe it. And I, like so many of the fans, do really, really miss going to watch football at the Vetch. I have vague memories of one of the most important games really in Swansea's history, that 4-2 win over Hull to retain our Football League status. I was about 10 when that happened. So I was there and I was around the club at the time. But for me, the most significant point of becoming a Swansea fan and where it got really exciting and I was really engrossed was Lee Trundle joining Magic Daps. He really put us on the map, and I think watching him week in, week out, and it just, we were on Soccer AM because of Lee Trundle, his skills, he made it so exciting. And yeah, that was my earliest and still one of my fondest memories, was getting to watch Magic Daps every week.
Yeah, that's incredible. And like you say, growing up watching Sky Sports and watching Soccer AM, you used to try and imitate what Lee Trundle did from 50 yards out. So no, that's brilliant. And again, we'll probably talk about Swansea a little bit more as we go on.
So, like Marco obviously mentioned, you're full on into your journalism stuff now, and obviously been really successful. But I wanted to kind of take you back into kind of the route that you took to get into that. So, you studied a degree in journalism at Staffordshire University, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then went on to a master's at Cardiff Met. What kind of led you to kind of go into journalism in the first place? What was kind of the trigger for you?
Yeah, so for me, I've always been a massive sports fan. From probably the age of 2 or 3, I'd go and watch my brother on the sidelines and started to kick a ball about. And from there, it's just been probably the most important thing in my life. And then I developed anorexia nervosa when I was 9 years old. I ended up getting admitted to hospital. And when I was about 15, 16, I was going through a really rough patch. I was in a hospital unit, an eating disorder unit, and that's actually where I did like my GCSEs and things like that. And my uncle actually took me out of the unit for an evening just to watch Swansea City. And at that point in my life, I was so poorly that I saw that as a way to say goodbye to him, because I didn't think I was going to be around for much longer. So for me, that evening of leaving the unit and going to football with him, initially it was kind of, right, this is how I say goodbye to him. This is one final evening with him that I'll have, because I felt so beaten by my eating disorder, and I just didn't see a way out of it manipulating me and the way it made me feel. But I got to the ground, and as I was watching it, it was incredible. It was 90 minutes where I engaged with the Abigail that was there before anorexia, because for so many years it had been everything that I did. I was so consumed by my eating disorder that everything I did was to satisfy this irrational voice inside my head. And I'd forgotten what Abigail enjoyed doing. And a nurse asked me one evening, going off on a little bit of a tangent, but she said to me, what does Abigail enjoy doing? And I said counting calories, because that's all I thought I knew how to do, and all I was good at. And she pointed out that was my eating disorder, not me. And that's when I really thought, I don't remember what I enjoy doing. So when my uncle took me to that match, I was able to re-engage with the person I was before my eating disorder. And it was actually the first time in such a long time that I had 90 minutes respite from my eating disorder inside my head. It was thinking about tactics and formations and the way Swansea had set up, and it was freedom for that 90 minutes. And don't get me wrong, it sounds that that's just like a glamorous story. As soon as I left the game, anorexia punished me for having that 90 minutes where she wasn't in control. And I do think of it as a separate entity now, as, you know, my eating disorder, and I do see it as a she, and that's how I deal with it, having it as a separate entity. But, you know, that 90 minutes was something then for me to build on. And I remember my uncle saying, you know, you really do know your football. So from there, I got back to my unit and I started writing little match reports. It was something for me because I had nothing else. At the time, we weren't really allowed to interact much with other patients, and it was before I had a mobile phone, so there wasn't really much else I could do. So I started writing my own little match reports, not for anyone, just for myself. And that's how I really built up the courage and the desire to want to fight my eating disorder and to believe that I could, and that I had something to fight for. So that's really what got me into wanting to study journalism. So I somehow scraped through my GCSEs and did my A levels. And this was all, you know, whilst battling my eating disorder and laxative addictions and various other addictions to medications. But yeah, I got through, and then, you know, in and out of hospital. I was very late going to university because I just couldn't really get a grip of my eating disorder, and it wouldn't have been right for me to go away to university. I wouldn't have been safe. But I finally got myself well enough to, and got into Staffordshire University. Thankfully, the lecturers were quite understanding and accepted me, even though, you know, I was obviously a little later and I did have these additional needs that I'd need therapy and counselling when I was there. But the lecturers were very good and very accepting, and that's really how I got into it. And I absolutely, you know, everything I do revolves around sport. You know, it's pretty much all I watch on TV. If there's no live sport on TV, I watch Sky Sports News. You know, it's just, that's how I live my life. So yeah, it was really the only career path that I wanted to go down.
It's pretty much blow my mind away in terms of the inspiration and drive behind your story. I just want to go back to something, Abigail, in terms of mental health, and when you've battled such obstacles like depression, anorexia, what advice would you give to someone who's going through something similar right now?
I think, you know, first of all, we have to understand that it is such a manipulative and complex illness. And what works for me might not work for other people, because I know that, you know, in the past, certain people have said this worked for me, and then I've tried it, it's not worked for me. And it is easy to get down about that. I take medication as well. So I've accepted that I'll probably be on medication for the rest of my life. But it's really hard when you're in the grip, but you are worth so much more than your eating disorder will ever allow you to believe you are. You know, going against it is the scariest thing I've ever done. And it's probably, you know, there were times where I relapsed, and in my own head, it wasn't failure because I was still getting there, but I felt like I'd failed, and I went back to square one so many times and got readmitted into hospital and was self-harming. But going against that and being in a position now where I can smile and not feel guilty, because I used to, with anorexia and to a certain extent the depression that came with it, I'd have to punish myself if I felt happiness. I wasn't allowed friends. I had to push them all away, and, you know, just had to live basically only trusting anorexia, because she made me believe that everyone else was going against me and didn't want the best for me. But only in recovery did I realize that anorexia tells you it'll stop when you reach a certain weight. It won't. It'll only stop when you're dead. And, you know, the fact that I went through being told upon my first admission, if we don't admit to you now, you're probably going to have a heart attack and die, and I still didn't want that help. I think that, you know, that tells you how manipulative this illness is. And it is like being in an abusive relationship with your own mind, because it'll make you believe that it's giving you everything you want and everything you deserve, but you only really start living when you start going against that eating disorder. So as hard as it is, And you will face difficulties. The nights that I cried and couldn't sleep because anorexia was trying to get me back on side, but it is the most rewarding thing when you're now allowed to be happy. Anorexia is still there every day for me, and it probably will for the rest of my life, but being able to have that control over it now and say that I have anorexia and it doesn't have me, that is the best thing for me. To be able to smile every morning, to be happy, to joke around, to do things with friends and family members, it's so rewarding and it's so worth it. So as much as you might not believe, because your eating disorder has worn you down, that you don't believe to be here or you don't believe happiness, you do, and you can get there.
It's powerful stuff, and it's kind of one of those where it leads into the mental side of the depression and how you're feeling, and you've talked about this having a grip on you, and you're a proud ambassador for Beat, and certainly I know I've done a little bit of reading about their work with eating disorders. Firstly, I can understand why you're a proud ambassador, but how important is their work, especially for somebody that's reaching out and certainly in a bit of a crisis?
Absolutely. And I think one of the really important things, and something that I'm passionate about changing, is the waiting times. So I was left basically to my own devices until I reached that point. I went to my GP diagnosed me with anorexia, but said my weight wasn't low enough to receive treatment. So basically to come back when I'd lost more weight, which is the worst thing, obviously, because it's a mental illness. It's not the physical symptoms are that they are an effect of this mental illness. So, that's something that needs to change. But in the meantime, having Beat as a resource, having people to talk to, and to try and understand the eating disorder before it grips you to the point where, you might possibly live with it for the rest of your life. I firmly believe that if there had been that early intervention, I would have made a full recovery. And it's only because there wasn't that early intervention that it was able to manipulate me and to get that grip where I'll live with it for the rest of my life. But also, the most important thing that Beat did for me was help my mum. A lot of times with mental illnesses, and it's through no fault of our own, because just like cancer, just like, having a stroke, a heart disease, it's not our fault. So, even though it does impact our family members and we will feel guilty about that, we need to remember it's not our fault. But my mum ended up back in therapy because obviously seeing her daughter going through something like this and not being able to do anything was traumatic. And Beat were there for her. They explained anorexia. They explained, what she could do, the best things to say, because it's quite easy to say the wrong thing to someone going through this. And Beat was, that resource, that she had letters coming through the post explaining things and detailing things. And that's where it really helped. It really helped my family members when I wasn't in a position to tell them what I needed and the help and support I needed. Beat were there to offer that.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's great work that you're doing, and certainly, having somebody that's gone through it, and it's so important that it's both males and females go through it. It doesn't sort of it doesn't, what's the word, discriminate.
Yeah.
It's males and females. So anybody listening will certainly be really, really, beneficial of that. Thank you.
So Abigail, you've kind of talked about experiences in your life, and I want to touch on some of your professional stuff that you've done, like some really, really big events, Rio Olympics, I mean, Euro 2016, especially being kind of like a Welsh football fan as well. So how did you kind of get involved in these events, and what was it like, being able to travel and do all this stuff when COVID allowed us to?
Yeah. So Rio, I ended up having to play a lesser role in Euro 2016 because they did coincide. So it was mainly radio updates and things like that. But for Rio 2016, it was incredible. I saw a voluntary position. So it was something that I had to fund myself, and I'm very grateful that my family helped me to be able to experience it. But it was an advert I saw, a voluntary position to go over to Rio. And you we went to a university for 2 months, beforehand to study Portuguese and get ourselves ready for the games. So we actually had to go for an interview in London to, get selected. And I did a lot of prep for the interview and thought I'd done enough. And then at the end of the interview, they asked me what my favorite animal was. And instead of thinking, they probably want me to say a lion because it's strong, I just thought of my actual favorite animal and said an octopus. And then they said why, and I said because of Paul the octopus. And it just all got very strange and very weird. So I left there thinking there's no way they're going to let some girl who's just said Paul the octopus is their favorite animal go to Rio for the games. But somehow they still let me go there. And yeah, it was one of the most incredible experiences to just be out there for the games and to understand it from a different cultural point of view and try and get used to, our media cover things maybe differently to the way they did over there, and just learn about those different things. And it was just their way of life, getting to learn, in Brazil, they don't really earn money so that they can have materialistic things or to have a house. They do it to have fun. And it was just nice getting to learn the different ways of life, I think, as well as having the great opportunity to help with their social media team throughout the games.
What a great experience. Brilliant. Cheers, Abigail.
So keeping on with the sort of train of thought with experiences, Abigail, like these experiences obviously led you to becoming a production junior for Sky Sports, including Soccer Saturday. So how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, so when I came back from Rio is when I decided I needed to do a master's course, because when I finished my undergrad course, went off to Brazil, and then I was looking for jobs when I came back and realized that even though I had experience as a journalist and I had the degree, a lot of companies now want you to be able to edit yourself, to be able to shoot and do all these different things that maybe I didn't have the best knowledge of. So to give myself the best chance, I thought if I go and do a master's course, that would probably be very beneficial. So whilst I was there, my lecturer used to work for Sky Sports, and he, knowing that I was a massive darts fan, got me a work placement at the World Darts Championships, which was like my dream come true. And from there, that was mainly making teas and coffees. I got to do a few interviews with players, but it was mainly the role of a runner, which for me was still absolutely fantastic. And I got the opportunity to watch people work and to learn from them. So then I saw a job come up as a production junior, which is, mainly a runner, but then you get to watch editors work and try and learn things. So Sky are very good at trying to, even though you're there as a runner, to try and help you progress at the same time. So I got a job as a runner, and that was, making Jeff Stelling and all the guests teas and coffees on a Saturday morning. And it was just incredible as a fan, as someone who's grown up watching that show. My nickname in school was Jeff Stelling. He's never known that, but it was Jeff Stelling because I just have all these football stats in my head, and just, as soon as you talk to me, I try and steer a conversation onto football because it's pretty much all I care about. So yeah, it was just incredible to have that opportunity. And then from there, I started to ask questions if I could, watch certain people doing different jobs and different roles. And then when a new producer came in, I asked if I could start doing features for the show. So he let me go to Everton and do a feature with Everton in the community about their mental health support that they offer. And I basically just asked the question, which I think is such an important thing to do when you're in this industry, regardless of the role. It's so important to just keep asking those questions. What more can I be doing to get to where I want to be? And obviously you've got to be mindful of the right times to ask that. You don't want to ask as soon as the show's gone on air and the producer's like up to his eyeballs. But, and you get a spare 5 minutes, just say, these are my ambitions. What do I need to do in order to get there? So I asked him, and at this point I've been doing presenting and reporting work for the Football Association of Wales as well. And he knows about that background and what I'm doing there. So I just said, look, what do I need to do in order to start reporting for the show? And he said, if you buy the equipment, we'll test you out and see how you go. So I was very thankful that in December last year, I bought the equipment and they sent me to a game. And it was, I'll be honest, I've never been so nervous. The only time I have been anywhere near that level is for Swansea Reading at Wembley in 2011. That's the only way I can describe, like, that. Honestly, the nerves, I didn't want to speak to anyone. I didn't want to eat. It was exactly the same as that day. But I didn't have Scott Sinclair to score a hat-trick this day, so there was nothing to help me. But yeah, it was just everything I'd ever dreamed of, and everything that I'd kept myself alive for, basically. You know, it was kind of, and I just, in my head, because I do still think quite negatively sometimes, I'm like, if I mess this up, I'm never going to be able to do it again. And I think everyone thinks like that to a degree, and everyone has those negative thoughts. But yeah, so I think being a runner was one of the most important things in terms of my development, because it taught me so much about, you know, staying grounded, which I think you have to, especially at Sky. There's not really anyone that works at Sky who has an ego. And I think that's really important, and something that I fully believe in. And it, you know, it's so important to just always work hard, always do your prep, always do what you can to help other people to get where they want to be. And I think, you know, that's a really important part of it for me.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible insight. You know, obviously we grew up watching Gillette Soccer Saturday religiously, and excuse me, we're trying to work out what's going on behind the scenes, and you see obviously so much goes into it. And recently you sort of touched on it already. You've covered, you know, you were covering Cheltenham, Cambridge, Man City, you know, so you're in the midst of it, and you also do radio for some RTE. That's correct.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare? You know, what's it like to cover? What's it like to cover those games, and you know, how do you actually prepare for it?
So there's, when I got given my first game, I started prepping for it. I think you get given, so I got given the game was on a Tuesday night, my first game, and I started preparing for it possibly 6 days before. So they had another fixture in between as well, but I just wanted to get as much knowledge in as possible. So I start off, I prepare, you know, I write down the expected teams, obviously their recent results and key things to know about each player, goals scored, but also, you know, what style of play, so that I have that in my head. And when I watch on the pitch, I'm not constantly going, number 12, who's that on there? You know, I like to familiarize myself, because as someone once told me, you know, you're watching someone's football team, and as someone who is a football fan, I know how important it is that when I'm watching someone covering my football team, I want them to get the stats right. I want them to get everything right. I want them to know, you know, everything about Connor Roberts, that they, you know, everything that they should and would know if they did their research. So that's always stuck with me, and I always now try and treat every football team that I cover as if they are my own, so that I can be that relatable person, and I can give that insight that a fan of that club would want and deserves to have as well, because, you know, every club means the same to every person. So I think that's important. And I remember a guy called Rob Phillips at BBC Radio Wales. He once told me that you can do all of the prep, use a third of it, but none of that information is wasted, because you've learned that now, and that's with you. So you might not use it this time, but you might use it in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time. And that, I don't think you can ever be too prepared for something. You know, people have often told me that there might be people who are better than you at a job, but there's no reason that they should be more prepared. There's no excuse for someone being more prepared than you, because you have got the resources to be prepared. So yeah, that's the key for me, is being prepared. If you go to a game and you've not done the research, I think more often than not it'll show. So I think you have to fully throw yourself into something. Over time, don't get me wrong, the more I've done these, the more now I can do my prep in a day. It's just because of the nerves, like the nerves for the first, and it was the same for the first game I did in Vision. It was just, I think I did a week and a half's worth of prep. Like I was just going over the same things every single day as if it was an exam, because it just means so much. And I think without that level of desire, I guess, you know, you've got to question, do you really want it? Now, like I said, now I can cram that prep in, because I know the things that when I was doing that week and a half's worth of prep, I know what was useful within that, and the things that maybe I didn't need as much. So I can, do it in order of importance, I guess. So still have it all there, but I'll know how to do it better, and you can manage your time better as well. So yeah, prep is the most important thing, and I still feel incredibly fortunate that I'm able to go to games at the minute, but obviously it'll be even better when the crowds are back.
Absolutely. And I think it's all well and good doing pre-recorded stuff, Abigail, but live broadcasting has its challenges. And how do you kind of cope with that kind of situation where, you've got lots of things happening all at the same time, and you've got to try and focus and kind of all the kind of challenges that come with live broadcasting? How do you deal with that?
I think, it's very easy to say, keep calm. My first soccer special, I wasn't calm at all. People said I sounded it, but I certainly didn't feel it. And I think, it's if you've done your prep, you'll be able to deal with those challenges. So my first game, I remember going into it thinking, if I could just have like 1 or 2 goals to ease me in gently, it finished 4-2. So, it was just kind of like, thrown straight in there. If I hadn't done the prep, I probably would have failed quite spectacularly. So again, I think that is the key to succeeding in those environments. And if you find yourself in a sticky situation, if you've got that information at the back of your head, for example, if you're doing a live update and a goal goes in and you haven't seen the goal because you're doing a live update, you can obviously throw it back to the studio so they can chat about it a bit, but you've got the information to surround that, so you can talk about that goal and the context of it. And that, that'll get you out of that situation because you can still talk quite insightfully. So I think, again, it all comes down to prep.
Yeah, good. And I suppose that goes across not just live broadcasting, but in careers in general and work and all that sort of stuff. Preparation is key, isn't it?
Absolutely. Definitely.
Which do you find more challenging between radio and TV?
It's interesting because, it's quite interesting because they're both completely different. The radio updates that you do are kind of, so you have the Sky News Radio, they have set times, so they come to you twice before the game, then on 15 minutes, 30 minutes, half time, then 15 minutes and half an hour into the second half. So you know when you're going to need to give those updates, so you can start thinking in your head how you're going to structure it. But I love that pressure, that live environment where you're, doing Soccer Saturday, they'll say, right, we're coming to you next. And I absolutely love that feeling of, what if no words come out? And that fear that's there. I love both of them, and I feel very fortunate to be able to do both. But the live environment, it just gives you a different feeling and a different buzz. But yeah, I love it all. If I get to talk about football, I'm happy. Or darts or snooker, of course. But yeah, as long as I get to talk about sport, throw it to me in any way, shape or form.
Obviously, as you just mentioned, alongside being a football fan, massive darts and snooker fan, you've covered some huge tournaments like the PDC and WDC. When you speak to players such as like Michael van Gerwen and people like that, like how does it feel and what's it like? Are you just looking kind of starstruck, or are you sort of focused on the task in hand?
I just see them as people, to be honest. There's only one person I've ever been starstruck by in my life, and that's Terry Griffiths, the snooker player. The only person in my entire life that I've been starstruck by, and it is the weirdest sensation. But aside from that, I think darts players in particular, because you get to know them the more tournaments you do, and you get to speak to them more often, away from the live environment, and you just see them as normal people. You just have these conversations with them, and I think that's what they respect the most, and I think that's when you get the most out of them, is when you just see them as normal people. I think the first time I spoke to Raymond van Barneveld, I was a little bit like, whoa, this is Raymond van Barneveld, but it's still, you just speak to them normally, and then you're going to get the most out of them. I think it is always nice to have, not maybe that feeling you're starstruck, but to think, I'm speaking to someone who I absolutely love watching and someone that I admire so much. I think it's fine to have that feeling because, you know, we are all fans, and I would never, ever want to lose sight of the fact that I am a fan of these people and I do idolize them in some way, shape or form. You know, for me, interviewing that man, Johnny Clayton, is like one of the pinnacles, and getting to do that. And they are normally, you know, pretty much all of the darts players are just such a delight to talk to. And it's just such a nice experience. Yeah, I think it's difficult to, when you've got a job where you're interviewing and then you're thinking, right, I need to turn this round, so I'll need to edit it. You do start thinking of them more as a job as opposed to, oh my God, this is whoever. But yeah, always have that little bit of a fan inside you.
No, that's brilliant, and certainly know you're proud Welsh, and you've got Gerwyn Price doing so well, Johnny Clayton, Mark Williams. There's so many, you know, and you spoke about Terry Griffiths. He's obviously now a pretty well-renowned coach.
Yeah.
So it must be nice, sort of from that point of view, being a Welsh lass and interviewing these sort of these iconic Welsh sports people.
Absolutely, and they are all such proud Welsh people as well. So it's really nice to get that and have that familiarity with them, and you instantly feel like you've got something in common with them. I think that's really nice, and you know, especially when you're at tournaments where, you know, at the World Darts Championships, for example, and a lot of the media is English, or, you know, they have a lot of Dutch people coming over. So to have that, you know, to be Welsh and then to have that like rapport, I guess, that you naturally just have, yeah, it is very nice. And again, that's something I think, so we've just set up a little darts vlog, a little Welsh darts vlog, and I think that's something important for people who are maybe up and coming. Like, you know, we're seeing so many podcasts at the moment that are just very similar. I think, you know, it's, people will start a podcast to talk about football, but there's no specific, you know, what sets that apart from others that are doing it. And I think that's why, so we've set up a Welsh darts podcast, and it's got a niche, and we felt like this was the right time to do it. So anyone who is thinking about doing that or setting one up, I think it's really important to have that niche, or to, you know, just have a little unique selling point that you really need. So I think that's something that I definitely say is very important at the moment, with so many people trying to break into the industry, and so many people, you know, there are only so many ways that you can try when you're applying for jobs and things to give yourself that step up, especially at the moment when we're in lockdown. But, you know, if you are trying to interview footballers over Zoom and things like that, just have that unique something that you're bringing to it. And also something for people who might be aspiring to this career. I still, you know, getting rejection emails, we all get them. And I think it's very easy to let it, like, even I got one Monday, I think I got a job rejection, and it still hurts. It feels personal, doesn't it? But, you know, just keep going is so important. And I know it's cliche, but it does get to us all, I think, to a certain degree when we get that rejection email, because it feels so personal. But don't let it get to you. Don't let it affect what you're doing with your progression, and just try and do things, even though we're in lockdown. Try not to let that get to you too much. Ask if you can join post-match Zoom interviews, just so you're getting that experience and you're listening to people giving interviews. So yeah, I went off on a tangent again, but I often do.
And this is what this podcast is about. And myself, Craig, Nath, we generally go off on a tangent and we'll bring it back. You talked a little bit about mental health, and, you know, having, you obviously going through your anorexia, having depression from that, getting those emails back saying, you know, you're not successful this time. You've talked about the importance of mental health. So what in particular would you say is most important about you sort of keeping your mental health fresh and healthy?
I think from someone who's been through difficulties, it's definitely having the right coping mechanisms. So for me, And again, like I touched upon earlier, there's a lot of trial and error. There are some things that I tried that didn't work for me. When I was an inpatient, they tried sending me to art therapy. I can't draw, I can't paint. And I just felt like that's another thing, I'm absolutely rubbish. I didn't, it was just like, it just didn't work for me. And I know it's deeper than that, but I just didn't get anything out of it. So whereas other people that were in hospital with me absolutely loved it and found it really beneficial to get their emotions out on a piece of paper, that's just not me. That's not the way I deal with things. Whereas cognitive behavioral therapy really worked for me, to be able to write my exact thoughts down, then process, have someone help me go, right, is that rational? Is that thought rational? And then to maybe think about how someone outside that situation would see it and how they deal with it, and how I need to be thinking that way more than the way I'm thinking in terms of my eating disorder. So that's something that's really worked for me. Exercise, but again, it's something I know people are very quick to say, if you're feeling low or if you have a bout of depression, exercise. It's not always that simple. Sometimes you can't lift your head off the pillow and you don't shower for 3 weeks. I've been there. And sometimes you do just have to ride it out. Sometimes it is about keeping yourself alive. And that's absolutely fine too. You will get to the position where you can get up and you can seek help. It's just keeping yourself in the game. But when you are able to, obviously talking about your feelings, I'm quite lucky that I've reached this point now where I can be so open and I can, talk quite easily about my struggles. If I'm having a bad day, I don't really think about it as a taboo subject anymore in terms of internally and how I voice it. Obviously it is, in society it's still a taboo, but for me, I find it quite easy because I'm so comfortable with my mental health now and talking about it. I find it quite easy to talk to my other half. If I'm having a bad day, I'll explain everything and we'll try and rationalize those feelings. And exercise when I can, just doing the things that really help me. So having the coping mechanisms in place, whatever they are for you, and you do need to find them. Like I said, you will go through trial and error. Don't give up, because there will be something that works for you. It might not be the first thing you try, might not be the second, but there will be something that helps you. So when you get that thing, make sure you write it down, or you remember exactly what it is, so that you can use that when you're not feeling great. You can rely on those coping mechanisms, because I rely on them, quite frequently.
Yeah, that's fine.
That we've talked about already, and it's probably affected a lot of people, is obviously the lockdown periods that we've had. Fortunately for yourself, Abigail, you've obviously been able to attend football matches and events and stuff like that, obviously bringing it to the nation and stuff. But that must be very different in terms of being in a big stadium with, you can hear other reporters talking and all that sort of stuff. How is that? How do you find that working? And obviously it must be quite strange to start with as well.
Absolutely. I think so when I got the job, I did 2 games, I think, before fans came back. Then there was a spell where there were 2,000 in the ground, and we were just getting used to that again. And obviously that was stopped again. It's strange. And I think it's really difficult being someone who's just landed, obviously, like a dream job, and not wanting to boast about it too much, because I completely understand, football plays such a significant role in our lives. We rely on it. It's escapism. We go there, we form friends. It's a place where we're not judged for things that are going on outside of that environment. And it's so, so crucial to a lot of our well-being. So, I don't want to kind of feel like I'm rubbing it in by, talking about it too much in terms of on social media and things. And yeah, it is difficult. And I think it's difficult more than anything because I know how those fans feel who can't attend games, and I feel for them more than anything. In terms of reporting, it's really horrible how familiar it's got, because at first it just felt so eerie, and now you turn up at grounds and you've kind of familiarized yourself to it, and that's really horrible in itself. Not hearing, because the games that I've done, the fan noise doesn't really get pumped in to the ground. So it is just silence. And as you said, you can just hear the other reporters, and it's so difficult because it's just not the same game without fans there. And obviously they make it so special, and it's the stories that they can tell you as well. I always love, like, when I turn up at a game, just talking to people who are fans of the club to hear their experiences. I'll talk to anyone who'll listen about Swansea against Reading in 2011. So, like, you know, just letting other fans talk to me about their own experiences like that. And I absolutely love things like that. So yeah, it is difficult, and I cannot wait until everyone can return to football and use it for positives in terms of their mental well-being. Absolutely,
100% behind you with that.
Could not agree more. And just to kind of close, Abigail, this question we ask all our guests is, if you could go back to the age of our current students, so 16 to 18, so if you could go back to a 17-year-old Abigail, what advice would you give yourself?
I think make sure, obviously it's different. I was in hospital when I was around that age, so it's definitely, don't give up. Believe that you are worthy, and that's both in terms of a career and life, because I didn't feel like I was worthy of life at that point. Always be willing to ask in terms of career moves, always be willing to ask the questions. Is there anything I can help with? And just believe in your ability. I still think the reason behind my nerves when I started doing this job was because, and everyone's the same, you start doubting whether you're good enough to do it. And I think believe in your ability, believe in your knowledge. And one thing that has always been instilled in me is always to stay grounded and to say yes to as many things as you possibly can, help as many people as you possibly can. And yeah, that'll get you far. But you also want to be, you know, you don't want to be the unliked person in the industry. So I was going to mention a certain human being who's in the media industry, but I thought better not. But yeah, it's so important to take those rejections that you do get, especially at a young age, when one thing that you always get when you're young and starting out is you've not got enough experience, and you start questioning, how at the age of 17, 18 am I meant to have 5 years of experience? But yeah, just find your feet, don't conform is something that I took a while to learn, is to not conform to society standards or industry standards. Be yourself, and someone will appreciate that, and someone will take you on.
Real.
Abigail, we've almost run out of time, and again we've really appreciated having you on. And again, probably you'd like to talk more about, you know, Brendan Rodgers being your favourite Swans manager of all time. But sort of just in closing, you know, what a powerful story that you have, and being able to have you on, and then you can then have that platform that you can speak to our students about mental health, going through your eating disorders, certainly the journey that you've went through. And one of the things that you said was just like, always go for it. You know, make sure if you're passionate about something, nothing's going to stop you, whether it be journalism, physiotherapy, PE teaching, whatever route that you want to go into. Make it your sort of number one to be the best, or to be the best that you can be, and that will generally get you to where you want to be. So really appreciate your time. All the best with all the football, darts, snooker that you cover, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers,
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.